All right. We're going to get going here in just a couple minutes. We're going to give everybody a little bit of time to file in, and we're supposed to start at 3, so I figure we'll give another minute or two, everybody to get comfortable, so that today we can have a good and productive town hall, bouncing some questions back and forth, talking about the issues that are important to Minnesotans and important to this part of the state. So in just a little bit here, we're going to get going. We're going to get going with some of the questions that we got asked ahead of time. We got some good responses when we asked people to reach out ahead of time with their questions. But then additionally, we will be taking questions live as we go through and people comment in the chat. We'll make certain those questions are read as well. It's just me on camera today. I can assure you, though, that my campaign manager, Joe C. Andresen, is just off camera here, who will also be monitoring chat, taking a look at your questions, and making certain that everybody is doing a good job today. I mentioned this in the description, but this will be recorded. This whole event will be posted afterwards. We'll probably chop this up into sections as well, so we can have the individual questions and have those videos posted to our website as well. We're going to do our best to make certain there are transcripts available as well, to make certain that for those of you who are hard of hearing or lack hearing, that we're going to make certain that this is accessible to you as well. We want to make certain that everybody is a part of these conversations.
Sure.
All right. In that case,
it sounds like a good time to start.
That is as much vamping as needs to be done. But like I said, we're going to continue to have people in the chat. We're going to continue to have people ask questions. So by all means, this is going to be an ongoing conversation for this hour. I don't want this to be just me kind of talking at a camera. Please make certain if you have questions, ask them in chat. Our first question.
Sure. Well, before we delve into perhaps some of the more difficult questions you've been asked, we've traveled the district a bit, and you've introduced yourself to people, but some people might be meeting you for the first time here. So if you could just give a brief introduction as to who you are,
sure,
and why you're running for...
That's right. Why am I in front of this camera on a truly gorgeous Saturday afternoon? So my name is Reed Perkins. I'm the Dfl endorsed candidate for Senate District 1, that's Northwest Minnesota, Polk, Pennington, Marshall, Red Lake, Kitson, and Roseau counties. I was born and raised in Minnesota, came up through Minnesota public schools, graduated high school here, went off, got a degree in biology, moved in with my a talented, amazing woman who I met the first day of English class, freshman year of high school. And my now wife, Betsy Littman, moved in with her. She got she was going to the University of Iowa at the time. She got a scholarship with the Air Force. So when she became active duty, I became a military spouse and happily traveled the country with her. We lived in Dover, Delaware for a while, where I got a master's in teaching. We moved to Mississippi, Biloxi, Mississippi, on Keesler Air Force Base for a couple years. There I did a lot of being a stay-at-home dad, but then also working with the homeschool group on base there as well, doing science education for that group. And then we got the great news when we were done in Keesler. We were told we had 2 options of where we could have a guaranteed spot next. We could either move to the Panhandle of Oklahoma, and we said, okay, what's the second option? And they said Grand Forks. And we said, wait, Grand Forks, North Dakota, like right across the Red River from Minnesota? And they said, yeah. And they said, all right, we'll take that one. So we enthusiastically moved back here. All the grandparents were really excited too, because then they didn't have to hop on a plane to visit their 2 granddaughters anymore. They could just drive up and see us here in East Grand Forks. Following politics, being engaged in politics is something I'd done for a while. When you're a public school teacher, it's something you're kind of forced to be involved in. And then additionally, when you are a military spouse, you are aware of the politics of the United States very pointedly for a number of reasons. So being engaged in politics and being involved has been something I've been doing for a while. But I got a chance to move back to my home state of Minnesota. This is a state that has given me a lot, and having this opportunity to potentially give back to my state was very important to me, particularly given the number of times I had engaged in policy discussions about what I thought we should be doing. Running for office was sort of a putting my money where my mouth is sort of situation. I'd been talking about this for so long, it was time I did it. So I did it. We're now running. We made certain to visit as much of the district as we could last year. We were at all 6 county fairs, talking to everybody we could, and that led up to last week where we got the Dfl endorsement. It was a very exciting moment for us. It felt like it validated a lot of the work we've been doing over the last year and a half, getting ready for this moment. And now I'm in front of the camera asking questions as the official DFL SD1 candidate. So getting to travel and getting to talk to so many people around the district has been extremely rewarding, and I've enjoyed it a lot. And that's why I'm here now, is to continue these conversations. There needs to be heavy communication.
Could you stop?
Sure.
Sorry. I'm not sure if people are seeing what I'm seeing, but the stream appears to have cut out your video.
Oh. Let's see here.
You appear to be back.
I have a thing that says encoding overload, consider turning down video settings.
If it happens again, we'll do that.
Okay.
But in the interest of using our time effectively, and the fact that the video appears to have returned, let's just step forward.
All right.
I felt as though that was a pretty good. Okay.
Yep. Some people in chat saying they've got video.
Okay.
Which is good.
That's good.
All right. In that case, we'll push forward.
Okay. Good. We'll push forward. So let's see. One of the first things that you talked about when you were discussing running in the area was the fact that Senate District 1 and a lot of western and northwest Minnesota has seen a distinct drop in population. People moving out of the rural areas, people moving out of rural or agricultural professions, and instead moving into, the cities, or even as close as Fargo across state lines, for other types of professions. So what sorts of things would you pursue in the Minnesota legislature to address what you've identified as an issue in the area?
Sure. So the numbers bear out pretty clearly that this corner of the state is either straight losing population, or in some of the counties, population is pretty stagnant. If we look at a town like Middle River, Middle River has a lower population now than they did in 1920. And that can make for some ugly spiraling. If a town is losing population, then when the mom and pop grocery store closes, they might not get a new one. That's going to cause fewer people to live near that town because they don't have as many grocery options, which is going to cause more people to move away, which causes more shops to close. So addressing that and identifying that as a problem, there are many avenues to tackle that. One is making certain people feel comfortable starting families here. And there's kind of 3 prongs to that. One is making certain that they have access to healthcare. Of the 6 counties up here, 3 of them do not have practicing OBs. It is difficult to start a family here if there's nowhere where you can safely have a baby. When we talk about encouraging rural healthcare, not just through investment in our hospitals, but also through things like increasing midwife and doula participation up in the area as well. That door-to-door medicine is something that can see a reinvestment and would help ensure people feel safe and healthy starting a family up here. Secondly, childcare. I was at a childcare forum in Warren that was talking about in Marshall County that there are people who sign up for childcare wait lists to get a spot for their child before that child is even conceived. And that's ridiculous. That's ignoring even the cost of childcare, but that trying to plan that far ahead, trying to ensure that everything is in a line that many years out is extremely difficult and an absolute blockade for people starting families here. So investing in rural childcare, making certain that childcare providers are empowered is important. And then additionally, there need to be jobs. And we talked about especially ag is hurting. It's hurting bad. The common refrain that I've heard from several people in the district now is that this is the 5th year of a 3-year downturn. Ag has always been cyclical. It's part of the nature of farming, but it has gotten to the point where a farmer can work hard, can do everything right, can get the weather that they need, and still not manage to succeed. Still, there are so many roadblocks for family farmers that even with everything else going right, everything possible in your control, and even several things that are not breaking your way, we're playing on a tilted playing field right now. Too much of the state legislature and too much state policy has gone towards backing industrial farming. Reinvesting and empowering family farms helps not just that section of the economy, but also props up these small towns. We know that a farmer is going to hire a local plumber, a local welder. They're going to get their tractor fixed locally. That segment, that the amount of work that goes into the economy because of functional family farms cannot be replaced. And ensuring that those 3 things are taken care of, that people have access to the health care they need, people have access to the child care that they need, and that we support those family farmers are all the 3 central ways that I plan on working through the Minnesota legislature to ensure people do have the option of living here, that there's not additional roadblocks for them.
All right, thank you. So as we've been on the campaign trail, and especially as you've increased your sort of internet presence on social media, you've been asked a series of questions about abortive care, and how that intersects with healthcare. And I know that you have a number of ideas or plans as to how to address that, but I would like you to address how you are integrating the concerns and values of people who believe that a fetus or an embryo deserves protection under law, as you're crafting those types of policies.
Yeah, this was without a doubt the number one question when we posted on Facebook that we were having this town hall, when we posted saying, please, everybody send us your questions. Undoubtedly, the question of abortion was the biggest thing we talked about. And I mentioned last year, when we were at all 6 county fairs in the district, there was a DFL booth at all 6 county fairs. There was only a Republican booth at 4 of the 6 county fairs. There was no Republican booth at Red Lake or Pennington County Fair. But Minnesota Citizens Concerned for Life, they did have a booth at all 6. This is something that this area cares about, and it needs to be addressed. Now, this oftentimes people don't believe me when I say this, but I think everybody has the same goal when it comes to this. I think everybody wants all children born wanted and healthy to healthy parents. That's the goal. That's the goal we're all working towards. And I think it's important to identify that is all of our end goals. So when I look at that as our goal, my question is, how can I safely lower the abortion rate? And as it turns out, there are a lot of really easy ways that have scientific backing that will do that integrate a lot of the concerns that people have across the board. But we all are working towards that same goal. But when we talk about one of the ways, there are two big ways that we know work towards lowering the abortion rate, making certain that every child that is born wanted. And when we talk about reproductive education in our public schools, we're talking about comprehensive scientific backing for our reproductive education in schools. I've taught 10th grade biology. I can guarantee you that there were 15 and 16-year-olds in my classroom who'd heard plenty of rumors that they believed to be true that just aren't. By empowering our students, by telling them not just about abstinence and natural family planning, which are two things that should be discussed. I do not want children feeling pressured to have sex. Telling them that abstinence is an option is absolutely something that needs to be included. However, teaching children and giving children the tools for any scenario they encounter, which includes teaching them about other birth control options, not just abstinence and natural family planning, ensures that children will make the right decisions. Teenagers do not want random pregnancies. Teenagers do not want sexually transmitted infections. By giving them those tools, and again, we've seen this across the board. We can compare states that have abstinence-only sex education to states that have a mixed curriculum. If we give children tools to make the right decisions, they make those right decisions. That lowers the unwanted pregnancy rate, and that lowers the abortion rate. Additionally, we need to talk about making certain that birth control is accessible and affordable to everybody. That includes making certain that it's covered by all insurance plans, or, as states like Colorado have done, making the state pay for them and making them available for free with the state's backing. For people who are worried about the cost to the state. When Colorado did that, they actually found that it paid for itself because a drop in unwanted pregnancies meant a drop in the number of people signing up for welfare programs. So this system pays for itself as well. And this is something that's backed across the political spectrum when we talk about making birth control available over the counter. There aren't a lot of things, if you follow national politics, there aren't a lot of things that Senator Ted Cruz of Texas and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez agree on. But this is one of them. The two of them have been working together to make birth control available over the counter. Again, allowing people that decision and empowering people the ability to prevent unwanted pregnancies lowers the abortion rate. It's something that Republicans and Democrats can fight for with that shared goal of making certain that every child is born wanted and healthy to healthy parents. When we give people the tools to empower themselves on it, they will succeed. So I mentioned at the start how we had that I had seen the Minnesota Citizens Concern for Life booth at all of the county fairs. That is a group that we are reaching out to have this sort of dialogue. I'm hoping that they will be happy to endorse us and talk to us long term about these things that we can fight for. We can fight for them together. We can fight for them with the shared goal of making certain that every child is wanted. These are things that across the political spectrum we can get to. And when it comes to the abortion discussion, oftentimes we get into arguments that I don't think actually help us reach that goal together. Because I believe that we all have the same goal. I think if you ask anybody, regardless of their pro-life or pro-choice label, if they could wave a wand today and make it so that every child is born wanted, healthy, and with healthy parents, yeah, everybody's going to wave that wand. Great, let's look at policies we can get to right now that get us towards that goal. I'm ready to work towards that goal with everybody. So we're going to be reaching out to the MCCL. We're going to have an open letter to them that's going to include some of the points I've talked about today and more. And I hope you'll all follow me kind of in that discussion that we have with the Minnesota Citizens Concern for Life together.
Thank you. When we were moving through the district last year, I believe we were at the Crookston Open Forum with our current senator and representative, and you met a gentleman who was an activist with an organization who's concerned about 50-50 parenting laws and making sure that children who were part of a relationship that was ending or something that ended up in the childcare court systems or the paternity maternity suits, were treated equally under the law. And I'd like to know if you could speak a little to your thoughts on that, because it came up as well when we posted online that we would be doing this forum, as well as Title 4D, which was brought up as a question during the your support or disapproval, or what you make of Title 4D at the federal level.
Sure. So let's start with 50-50 shared parenting as we talk about family law here. Full disclosure, my parents divorced when I was 6, so this is something that I'm at least a little familiar with. I feel very fortunate. I consider myself close to both of my parents, biological parents. I'm glad to have both of them in my life. And I also feel lucky to have some of the step parents that I've like, not to ignore the benefit that non-biological parents have, but just as I'm talking about family law, I am a child who's seen divorce and seen that shared custody situation. And I do, so yes, the gentleman at the Crookston Town Hall who we met over a year ago, and then again, when we opened it up for questions, we had additional questions about family law. I am in favor of 50-50 parenting being the default. Obviously, there are going to be situations where 50-50 doesn't end up being the result, but starting with the idea that both biological parents have an equal right to custody, particularly as a stay-at-home father. I have experienced situations personally where it feels like I am not being treated as a full parent because I'm a father. That hurts a lot. I have spent the last 4.5 years with my girls every single day. I feel extremely fortunate that I've been able to do that. Fathers are parents as much as mothers. Making certain the starting place in our court system is 50-50 is absolutely something that I'm in favor of. Talking about Title 4D, this was a more specific question, and when I first got it, I will admit that I actually was not familiar with Title 4D. And so as a brief aside, I think it's very important that any representative in any fashion is able to look at a new problem and try to go at it with fresh eyes, to be able to stop and say, okay, I don't know anything about that. Please tell me your experience, and I will go and look into it. So to give background, Title 4D is a federal and state shared program in which the state is responsible for trying to establish parentage, establish court orders for visitation and child support, and by doing that, they have some of the money that they have spent on those things given back to them by the federal government. So there's a cost sharing program between state and federal. This program has existed since the mid-1970s, when prior to that, all child support and care was kind of taken care of on you would hire a private lawyer to do this back and forth. That wasn't working for a variety of reasons, whether one parent had less income and therefore wasn't able to afford a lawyer, or a variety of other things. That private situation was not working. So the states were incentivized to do that. And I have, in researching this question, I found a lot of people have this heavy criticism of Title 4D and this feeling that the federal incentive dollars are being either misappropriated, or that the state shouldn't be incentivized to do what it's doing at all, that it's not working. And I'm going to switch screens. Let's see if this works. I'm going to pause briefly just to see if my screen share is suddenly what it should be. Wait for a couple seconds. I've got a couple other tabs open as well that I hope we can talk about today, but let's see if the screen sharing is working. Maybe. Sorry, we're having trouble playing the video. Okay, great. So looking at a couple things as I'm trying to approach this problem with fresh eyes. One of the things that jumped out at me here, we are looking at the 2017 Minnesota Child Support Performance Report, and I can produced by Minnesota Department of Human Services, and there are a bunch of things in this document. One of which was where'd it go? Here we go. One of which was this border state comparison, looking at past effectiveness of the program. And here, when we look at this row for cost effectiveness, we see that Minnesota is actually performing much lower than some of the neighboring states. What this number means is that for every $3.30 spent, for every $3.30 distributed to custodial parents, the state is spending $1. And when we look at neighboring states, Iowa, it's $5.73 to parents for $1 spent. South Dakota is over $10 for every $1 spent. So this was an eye-opening number for me that says we might need to take a look at this program. Why is Minnesota's cost ratio so much higher than some of these other states? Is this because we are spending inappropriately? Is that because we are spending too much? Is it because we're not distributing enough? But that is one of the questions that this number brings up to me. And then if we scroll down further, here we go. County by county distributions and expenditures. We're jumping to 2017. State distributed $580 million to custodial parents. State spent $175 million to do that. That's where we get the cost effectiveness of $3.30. And then when we look at the federal incentives, so Title 4D provided Minnesota with $12 million that year. There were some state incentives too. So there were $13 million total in incentives. My understanding of reading this program was that all of this $13 million has to be reinvested on the county level, or if it's not reinvested, it's given back to the state. So to jump back, so those are the numbers that I found, those are the numbers that I was looking at as I came upon this problem for the first time, as people were questioning Title 4D's effectiveness in doing what it's supposed to be doing. The goal is to make certain that custodial parents are supported in what they're doing, in raising children. And so I do have some questions. I want to make certain, I want to know why Minnesota's ratio is lower than other states. Of that 13 million, of which if you broke it down by county, which was in that document, it was about $150,000 to $200,000 was invested in Senate District 1. Was that done well? So when talking about Title 4D, I can understand why people have questions about how it's working. I have not found enough information to tell me whether that's working well or what the purpose of that, where some of those flaws might be. Further research definitely needs to be done there. But I hope walking through this process with you, I hope you've been able to see a little bit when I'm approached with a new problem, because constituents are going to come to me with problems that I am unaware of, and that's good. Constituents need to be talking to their representatives, and no representative can ever be aware of every problem that everybody is having. So when somebody comes to a representative with somebody new, I hope they go through this research process and then ask questions back of the constituent. I've found this. Was that your experience? Where did you come from in all of this? So those are some of my thoughts on Title 4D, where I think it's at, and where I think the state of Minnesota should be with 50-50 equal parenting.
No, good. And I think that there are obviously constituents in the area who have a more personal relationship with this particular issue. So I know that conversation is going to continue to be open and evolving, but I know that you wanted to address it today. There have been a couple questions, and I know there are some that we want to get to that have been asked prior to today, but I wanted to pull out one of them. A constituent is curious about, and I want to frame it based on a question that you received at a county fair. So marijuana legalization is something that has been implemented across the country in a number of different states in a number of different ways. There have been some debates that have happened in Minnesota as well, in the legislature, different bills that have gone through and not gone through. And as it pertains to this particular area, I'd like you to speak a little bit about your views on marijuana legalization and what purpose or problems you might see, as well as pointing towards how it affects this district as a rural, agriculturally driven district in particular.
So there are two ways, especially, that it's going to affect this district. One, it's going to allow industrial hemp production, which, particularly as we see some of the other commodity prices right now, wheat went down below $5. Again, wheat farmers can't handle that sort of buy price on their crop. Giving farmers additional options is going to help. And industrial hemp production is absolutely one of those things that we're seeing on the rise in states that have legalized. The other way that legalization is going to affect this district a lot, if you have a legal dispensary in East Grand Forks, it means people from North Dakota are going to cross the border. You're going to see a lot of traffic from that first mover advantage that Minnesota is going to get. To get more towards governing philosophy in general, there are 20 states now that have legalization, in that ballpark. That means that Minnesota has 20 different blueprints that it can look to. And we can see, how did this state's implementation go? Was its rollout bumpy or smooth? What of that do we want to make certain to take into our own rollout of this? So we have those to look at. And across the board, I think marijuana legalization has gone well for the states that have done it. Some states have done better than others, but again, we can now learn from those. Broadly, I do not think that marijuana has any problems that aren't shared by alcohol. If we're going to have alcohol be legal, I think marijuana should be legal. There is no reason for those two substances to be treated differently from a scientific standpoint in terms of addiction rates or the other knockdown effects. I will say, though, one of the numbers that came out of Colorado, the first state that legalized marijuana in this country, one of the numbers that I found most fascinating when looking at Colorado's interaction with it is they found marijuana use for people under the age of 18 fell after legalization. And so you have to be at least 18 to use marijuana in Colorado, but usage under the age of 18 decreased. And the theory on why that was is it was no longer rebellious. It was no longer cool. Like, if you could just go down to the corner store and get it, it wasn't a rebellious act. It wasn't a teenager thing to do. So they actually saw youth rates decrease after legalization, which I thought was something that not a lot of people probably predicted. But overall, yes, I'm in favor of legalization. It's going to help farmers in this district because it allows industrial hemp. It's going to be a particular boon for border counties like ours because we're going to see people cross the border to get it. And by making certain that our court systems are not taken up with these sorts of offenses, it's going to help ensure that we're dealing with actual serious crimes. So that is the long and short of...
So, not to interrupt you, a concern that was brought up, I believe, at the Roseau County Fair and at the Marshall County Fair was how you'll ensure that if the farming of marijuana occurs, family farms will be, given a fair shake. And if you have any comments on that briefly.
No, anytime it is completely reasonable for anytime a farmer hears about a new idea or a new regulation coming from the state legislature at this point to be immediately suspicious of, I want to make certain that this isn't going to push me further out of the market. And that's a valid concern. So looking at some of the other policies we have to boost family farming is going to be important. And ensuring if we legalize marijuana and use a path that only allows, multi-billion-dollar ag conglomerates to grow hemp, then we have failed in our rollout of that. We need to make certain that small family farmers are included in crafting this legislation and ensuring that the family farmers have a seat at the table when deciding how this rollout is going to happen so that they don't get left behind.
There are a couple questions that are follow-ups to that, but I want to make sure that we get to some of our other questions that were asked, and maybe we will return to some of the questions that are currently happening in the chat.
Great.
So first, we received a handful, as well as the broader conversation, but we received a handful of questions about COVID-19, which is, of course, why we're doing a digital town hall right now. So it's important to respond to that. So I want you first, you've been asked pointedly whether or not you agree with what Walz has done in the state of Minnesota, and this can include the stay-at-home orders themselves, as well as the decision to slowly open the businesses and how it affects the area. But I want you to focus at this stage specifically on Walz and where Walz is coming from. And then there will be a couple other questions about it, but try and keep it...
Obviously, COVID-19 and COVID-19 policy is something that could, and likely at some point will, receive its own town hall. We hope to continue to do more of these virtually because of COVID-19, but to try to keep it as short as possible. I agree that the town hall ordinance, I agree with the stay-at-home ordinance that it should have gone into effect. That is good. It needed to be done. When we look at a state immediately next to us, Iowa, that had no stay-at-home order, they have half of our population and more total COVID-19 cases than we do. And that was them without a stay-at-home order. So it was good that we did it. And I think it's important to note that Walz the stay-at-home order is coming out in pieces. On the 18th is the official end of the stay-at-home order. And that's an indication that Walz and the University of Minnesota and the Mayo Clinic now say that we are safe in terms of when another spike happens, and all indications are that it's when, that we are prepared to handle it now in a way that we weren't before. That being said, the single biggest thing right now that I would like to see with Minnesota going forward, Walz has promised that it's going to increase, and I hope we hold him to that, is testing. Testing. Especially from my science background, you cannot make good policy if you are flying blind. If we do not know the extent of cases in Minnesota, we cannot make appropriate policy decisions. When we look, if I'm going to jump over here. All right, this is map of Minnesota, and this is up-to-date COVID-19 cases. If we look here, if we're looking at cases per population, so per capita COVID cases in Minnesota. We got Nobles County down here. It has the fifth highest ratio in the country, and this is the JBW meat processing plant, and it's across from the Smithfield plant in South Dakota, which is a good reminder that, unfortunately, this virus does not obey state lines. It does not care. And we can talk about the meat packing industry more and how that's another aspect of ag that comes into this. But they're number one in Minnesota. If we scroll down, we see here's Polk. Polk is 23rd out of the 87 counties in terms of cases per capita. St. Paul at Ramsey County, we're not that far behind them. And when we look at Polk, we got news out of the Exponent today, looking at the Douglas House, which is an addiction treatment center in East Grand Forks, where there have been 6 positive cases of treatment of staff, and yet there have been no testing of the individual patients. That's a huge problem. It is almost a guarantee that there are more cases than we are catching. And in order to make good policy moving forward, we need that testing. We need it, and we need it 3 months ago. The one other kind of comment before I go forward, I want to move over. This is whitehouse.gov/opening America. This is the federal government's criteria. I'm going to click criteria here. These are the proposed guidelines for reopening states. If you look at these and compare them to Minnesota's data, we don't actually fit the federal guidelines for reopening yet. Things like a downward trajectory of cases. We don't have that. I'm not going to go through these individually, but Minnesota as a state does not meet the federal guidelines for opening back up, as an aside. The other thing that I really want to bring up when I said testing is something that we need, the other thing that needs to be done, and needs to be done immediately, is an expanded vote-by-mail program for the state of Minnesota. Secretary of State Steve Simon is certainly working on it, but we have primaries in August. We watched our neighbor Wisconsin spread COVID-19 because they forced people into shared polling places. There have been dozens of cases that have been tracked to polling places. We need to make certain that all Minnesotans have that option to vote by mail. We have an already robust absentee balloting system. The state knows how to handle it. The post office is prepared to handle it. That is one of the other things that we need to do immediately. Speaking as an active duty military spouse, I have been voting by mail from both Delaware and Mississippi for years. The military knows how to do this and knows how to do it safely. The state of Minnesota has a great absentee ballot system. We know how to do it, and we know how to do it safely. Making certain that Minnesotans can exercise that vital constitutional right to vote without putting themselves in personal health jeopardy is vital. So, yes, I agree that the stay-at-home order should have gone into place. Walz seems to be listening to the science that the University of Minnesota and the Mayo Clinic are putting out there for how to slowly open back up. But I want to see testing ramped up. I want to see testing ramped up hard, especially in rural areas where, we saw Nobles County is not dead center Minnesota. Stearns County is second in Minnesota right now. They're seeing a massive increase. That's not the heart of the Twin Cities. We need that testing, and then we need vote-by-mail programs. We need those. We needed those regardless of COVID-19, but we especially need those because of the coronavirus.
So let's see, a couple questions in the chat. I want to, before we move on from COVID-19, I do want to address that without being too specific today, there are a number of members of the Minnesota legislature who seem to be either downplaying or dismissing the root causes of the disease. And so not thinking, or like how it is affecting Minnesota. So you can use this particular incident as a way to situate this question, but a question that comes up is, how will you, as a senator for Senate District 1, interact with politicians who don't see the same problems that you do? So you addressed with the abortive care issue how you might address an issue when people see similar problems, but what about when they won't even acknowledge the problem?
It's difficult. We've had my opponent has shared videos which accuse the state of Minnesota of actively encouraging fraud among doctors, and my opponent has also shared videos saying that mask usage will make us sicker. Neither of those things are true, or if there is fraud in the state of Minnesota, there's certainly been no evidence of it. For the record, if he can point to a doctor who is inappropriately diagnosing COVID, yeah, we need to talk about it. But he hasn't. He's just throwing this accusation out there. Mask usage is different. We have a ton of evidence that says mask usage makes us safer, especially in a disease that transfers, that is infectious through coughs and sneezes. And it is difficult. And my background, so I've worked in science education for over a decade now. starting from that basis of, all right, let's identify shared facts. If we can't do, when I talked about abortion, I talked about that shared goal. Same thing. Let's start by going fact by fact. What do we agree with? Where is that overlap? And then moving forward from there. And if we don't have overlapped on a fact, today in this town hall, I've brought up documents. If you look on our website, if you go on perkinsformn1.com, if you look through our policy section, you will see that every single policy we have put out there has a minimum of 4 citations at the bottom. Whether that's looking at AARP documents or Minnesota statistics, we're very open with the facts that we are looking at. And my goal is at least to start there and to be like, okay, here's what I'm looking at. What are you looking at to come to your conclusions? And trying to find those areas of overlap before moving forward. And ideally then finding areas of overlap on goals too. Let's all move towards this goal together. Okay, what data shows us we can do that? And that's where I've come at problems as a science teacher for over a decade, and that's where I would come at problems from a legislative angle as well.
All right. So these next 2 questions came up in the chat, and I want to be sure that people who are watching the town hall today know that we'll revisit them at greater length in the future. But try and keep your answers to them short, because I want to move on to the last sort of closing questions of the town hall. Do your best.
Okay, I will see, and I do want to emphasize, we will have more virtual town halls. We plan on being extremely open, and if we get a ton of questions like this, and these become a weekly thing or a twice weekly thing, great. Our campaign will put forward that investment. There is nothing more important in a representative democracy than ensuring representatives can talk to who they're representing. That is vital. So, on that note.
Okay, so two quick sort of engagements. One, what is your position? How will you engage with? What sort of policies or data do you have that addresses the needs of the LGBTQ, particularly our transgender community members, transgender, and we have certain data on that, but just speak to those issues very briefly. So
speaking to them quickly, and again, that is another topic that could receive its own hour-long town hall, undoubtedly. To be brief, some of my earliest political work was with the Gay Straight Alliance at Northland College. I will be a strong ally of the LGBT community. Their plight is one that has been going on for too long. We need to address it. Trans rights are human rights. Undoubtedly, full stop. That is what the science shows. That is both the scientifically correct thing to do and the morally correct thing to do. Last year in the budget, there was talk about Minnesota tried to cut funding for conversion therapy, and it didn't pass. Minnesota still funds conversion therapy. Every reputable psychological association in the country, at best, defines conversion therapy as neutral, and more often than not defines it as actively damaging to the individuals who are forced to undergo it. Conversion therapy should not exist, and it especially should not receive $1 of funds from the state of Minnesota. So there are a lot of issues that are affecting the LGBT community, and I hope we can address them all at a longer time. But in short, I'm a strong ally of the LGBTQ community. Trans rights are human rights. Conversion therapy is almost certainly a form of psychological torture, and we need to get rid of it immediately.
Thank you. The second quick freebie, if you will, you were asked a question about tax dollars when engaging with marijuana legalization. So I just want, if you're drafting marijuana legalization and you're taxing the revenue that comes from that particular industry, what are 2 things that you might redirect those tax dollars to?
Education would be the big one. We saw that as successfully as a roadmap in Colorado. When Colorado first legalized, they had so many tax dollars their opening bill required a percentage of the tax revenue to go to education. it was so successful that the state had to ask teachers to come up with additional things to spend money on because every ask was fulfilled. Wouldn't that be a great problem to have? And then additionally, look, healthcare. Almost every problem in the state of Minnesota can come back to healthcare. When we are looking at our rural healthcare system, we know it is suffering. We know it is bad. When we talk about the state reinvesting dollars into rural healthcare and making the state healthier, that improves everybody's lives. So education, because that's, as I said, I want to follow roadmaps that other states have proven to be successful. And then healthcare, because I cannot think of a bigger, if I could wave my wand and solve one problem in the state, it would be ensuring that everybody has access to the healthcare they need. So those would be the two things.
All right. So from the first day when you made your intentions known to run for Senate, when you contacted the local party units, it became readily apparent that many people in this district felt as though you would be fighting a very uphill battle. That the perception of this district is that it is very deep red. It is a very Republican district, and that you were seeking the DFL endorsement, you would have a huge fight in front of you. So how do you assuage fears that this is an impossible fight?
Yeah. Okay. First of all, I wouldn't have run if I didn't think I could win. I'm not doing this for fun. I'm doing this because change needs to be made and change can be made. That being said, looking at the numbers, Leroy Stumpf was senator for this district from the mid-'80s until he retired in 2016. Leroy Stumpf never lost an election that he ran in. This district, counties in this district, voted heavily for Obama in both 2008 and 2012. When we look at voter registration, there are more independents in this district than there are Republicans and Democrats combined. The idea that this is deep red just isn't reflected. When we look at Governor Walz's approval rating with COVID-19, when we narrow those polls down to just CD7 or just Western Minnesota, Walz's approval rating sits in the 80s, Trump's approval rating sits in the 40s. The idea that this is deep red, I do not see the evidence for that, either in the numbers or going around and talking to people. When we were at the Roseau County Fair, Roseau County had one of the highest percentages of Trump voters in the district. I lived in Biloxi, Mississippi for the 2016 election. That county had a lower Trump win than Roseau County did. When I lived in Biloxi, when I saw the number of Trump flags and the Trump memorabilia, when I went up and I lived there. When I went up to Roseau County, we were at the county fair. There were tractors, there were trailers, there were 4x4s, there were pickups. I saw one piece of Trump memorabilia in the entire parking lot over 2 days. These are not the sort of deep red counties that we see in other parts of the country. Now, these are not deep blue counties either. As I said, the independents outnumber the Republicans and the Democrats combined. The people in this district are looking for someone who they believe is going to fight hard for them. They do not, the letter next to the name is not important. It's not as important. Will you fight for me? That's what voters up here want to know. And that's what I'm out here to prove. That's why I'm doing these town halls. One of my criticisms of my opponent, when he held his town halls, he held them all between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. on weekdays. That's not inclusive of people who have 9 to 5 jobs. So when we held this town hall, we wanted it to be on a Saturday afternoon, sometime when everyone could attend. We will undoubtedly also hold town halls during the day on weekdays too. But that idea of making certain we're available to everybody because people need to see you. People need to know that you are going to fight for them. That's what's going to win this district, not the letter next to my name.
All right. We're going to move into some wrap-up questions. So some people will call these the softballs.
Excellent, because I've run out of
good. We're going to run a little over time, but we're going to have more of these. We'll address more of the questions, and so this is part of the wrap. So first, it was asked in the thread. It was asked more than once. Just both sort of where you get some of your political inspiration. You could talk about a person or a thing if you want, but also how you come to policy decisions or values. Like how are you going to be a member of the legislature? Where are you going to get your,
Sure.
values and information?
To answer the first question, if I had to pick a political idol, that's easy. If you've seen me around on the campaign trail, I have a big tumbler that says, we all do better when we all do better. The immortal words of Paul Wellstone. And that's a name that when we've gone around the district, we've talked about us wanting to have cafe politics the same way he talked about it. And unfortunately, COVID is going to hurt some of those abilities, but that's the goal, is to be present in communities, to be able to sit down at local cafes, at local coffee shops, at local diners, and talk to people about the problems that they personally are experiencing. Politics needs to exist to improve people's lives, and you cannot do that if you do not talk to people. Paul Wellstone was a master at that, and that would certainly be the political idol I would name. When we talk about how I would behave in the legislature, I've talked a lot during this town hall about shared goals. If I find somebody with the shared goals, the same shared goals that I have, great. I'm going to work with that person. The letter next to their name is not important to me. I'm going to find Democrats I disagree with. I'm going to find Republicans I agree with. The idea is, what is your end goal? And if we can start from that position, find that thing that we have in common, that both of us are going to fight for side by side, that's what we're going to do. Like, finding those allies, regardless of name, starting from shared goals, starting from shared values. It's the same way I want to work with voters. But finding those allies is the way to work. And again, the goal is, regardless of the letter next to the name, Democrat, Republican, Independent, let's work on our shared goals.
I'll ask it again to hopefully get at what some folks were asking. Where do you draw your values from?
Where do I draw my values from? My parents would be the short answer. No, so I was very fortunate. Both of my parents were very present and invested in me and my younger brother. I remember, I mean, when I was very young, my mom would have me sit on the bed and we'd watch Good Morning America together, and I would ask questions about like what was going on in the world, and she always encouraged me to take part in those things. My dad was so amazing at bringing me around the state. We would go to state parks, we would go to bike trails, and anytime there was an informational placard, we would stop and we would read the plaque, and that was very important to him, that I knew the history of this area and that I was engaged, and that if I had the opportunity to learn, that I took it. And that from both of my parents, that hard thirst for knowledge, that making certain you consume everything that's available to you in terms of if there's a new fact to learn, if there's somebody to talk to who has a new perspective, that those are the things that you need to be doing, that to be constantly asking questions, to be constantly observing, to be constantly talking to people, and to constantly be finding that common ground. I remember those lessons from my parents very vividly. Both, again, sitting in the bed with my mom watching Good Morning America and going on Minnesota's bike trails and stopping whenever there was a little placard on the side of the road. Those are memories I hold very dear to me, and memories that I draw inspiration from.
All right, closing statements. Just anything that you have to say to...
Thank you. Thank you for showing up today. When I talk about the vitally important piece of democracy can't exist if we do not have the conversations between our legislators and our constituents. Voters need to know that their voices are heard. And these sorts of virtual town halls and all of you taking part in these, that advances this conversation. I'm always heartbroken to hear people talk about how they hate politics and they don't like politicians anymore. And that always hurts me because I understand why. it is very easy to look at politics as this name-calling contest where you dig in your heels and you stake out your side and you fling insults into your opponent, and that's what politics is. And I don't blame people for seeing that and then feeling like, no, that's not what I want to be a part of. I want nothing to do with it. That's not what politics should be, and it's not what politics can be. Politics can and should be, how do we make society work to help everybody? How can we make people's lives easier? That's what we should be doing, and that value, that bringing everybody together is what we should be focusing on. And so thank you, everybody who's showing up today, for being a part of these conversations. And my hope is that we can continue to have these conversations and work towards that ideal of everybody being part of the goals of working towards a better future, to make certain that we all do better when we all do better. So thank you all. Thank you for being part of this. Like our Facebook page, Perkins for MN1. Go to our website, perkinsformn1.com. We're going to continue to post events and policy updates on both of those places. If you're not part of our email list already, please message us your email. We have a sign up on our website as well so that you can be in the loop with the various things that we're planning on doing around the district, that even with COVID-19 and social distancing, we're still going to make certain that we are, this Thursday and Saturday, we're going to be at the farmers markets. In Halleck, you will see us on Thursday. In Mentor, you will see us on Saturday. We're going to be there wearing masks, and we're going to be there obeying appropriate social distancing rules, but we are going to be there as best we can. So thank you for this today. Thank you for inviting us into your community. If you like what we've been doing so far, on our website, you will find a donate button. Part of COVID-19 means that we're not going to be able to do door knocking. That means we're going to need to do ad buys in different ways. That includes billboards and radio ads. Your money that you donate right now is going to go directly towards that sort of voter outreach. So if you enjoyed what we've done today, if you want to keep being a part of this campaign, which I hope all of you do so we can make certain that Northwest Minnesota is well represented again, please like our Facebook page, keep checking out our website, get on our email list, donate to Perkins for MN1, and continue being involved. These sorts of conversations are what we need and are amazing. So thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for taking a part of your Saturday afternoon to be with us. We are going to be doing more town halls and more of them specific issue focused as well. So keep an eye out for those. But